Welcome to another edition of the Watchful Citizen, a local access program brought to you by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. I'm your host, Jane Egan. My guest today is Lincoln Public School Board member Don Mayhew. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Jane. It's nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. Let's start off by telling our viewers a little bit about your background and how long you've served on the LPS board, and if you could also tell us who you represent in the community.
Sure. So I have served on the Lincoln Public Schools Board of Education for 16 years. This past spring, I won re-election, so I'm now serving my 5th term. When I'm at the end of this term, I'll have been serving for 20 years. I serve in Southwest Lincoln. And the city council, for example, has half of their members are districted and half are at large. Mm-hmm. On the school board, we're all districted. So I'm kind of southwest and western Lincoln, and there are 7 of us serving those districts, and the districts are about the size of a legislative district. So I represent about as many people as maybe a state senator.
Okay. Do you have any idea how many that is?
Last time that we did the census, it was about 37,000 people. It's grown a little bit more since then, obviously. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35 to 40,000 people, depending on the district.
Okay. I'm going to follow up a little bit. How many schools are in that district?
We have over 60 buildings. Most of those obviously are elementaries, 36 elementaries, and then we've got...
now this is citywide you're talking
citywide,
about, not just in your district.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's one of the things that's unique about Lincoln, I think, compared to a lot of other school districts, where as the city of Lincoln grows, the school district grows along with it. So we don't have these little sub-districts. I mean, we do in terms of school board representation, but in terms of the schools, they're all our schools, they're all our kids. So we don't have some of those parochial issues maybe that some other districts would have. And then, of course, we have the 6 high schools and our focus programs and the Career Academy, which opened last year, and which is kind of an exciting new concept for us.
It is. Where's that located?
The Career Academy is a partnership with Southeast Community College, and there is a new structure that is built at Southeast Community College, and our students, our Lincoln Public School students go there, but it's also open to any high school kids in the county. But the students who go there, once they graduate from Lincoln Public Schools, they'll not only have their diploma, but they could have as much as a year of college knocked out by the time they graduate high school, and then also perhaps a technical certification of some kind. So it's something that we put a lot of time and energy into researching, looking at best models across the country, and I think it's something that's going to provide excellent value for our students and for the community.
I'm going to follow up a little bit with that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a student attending Lincoln High, a senior. Would they be going to the other campus then for classes to get that certification?
Mm-hmm. The way it works
So
is it would be half day, and there's a good point there too, because we still do have programs at all the existing high schools. So if there are things that kids are interested in taking at their high school, but they don't want to go in depth at the Career Academy, we still have those offerings at the regular high schools. But then the way it would work is that, for example, a student might spend half their day at Lincoln High, and then they would take a bus. We provide transportation to the Career Academy. And then they would take a bus over and then spend the afternoon at the Career Academy taking that in-depth content.
Gee, I'd like to go back to high school.
Me too.
Yeah.
I would have done well in that system.
I would have too,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Okay, well, the board held some public hearings recently on the LPS budget. Has that budget been adopted? And can you talk to us a little bit about what is in the budget and if and when property rates could be affected? And just talk to us about the budget, when it goes into effect and for how long.
Sure. So our budget, we do it on an annual basis. I know that there are some bodies, the city and the state, that do it biannual. We do it every single year. We're in the middle of that process right now. We have not yet adopted our budget for next year. One of the things that has been driving our budget, the story of our budget this year, as with so many of our recent past budgets, is our growth. We've been growing by 800, 900, 1,000 new kids every year for the past many years. Yeah. And when you think that an elementary school is built for 450 students, that's like we're absorbing 2 elementaries worth of new kids every year, and we've been doing this for the last several years. So growth is driving our budget. Our budget is going to be going up this year, and almost all of it is going towards people. We're a people industry. Almost 90%, 88% of our budget is people. When you think of the teachers and the staff and the support services, the things that we need to educate kids, most of it is people. One of the things that has been out in the air is this concept that schools would do so much better if you could get it to where at least 65% of the budget was spent on education in the classroom, and we are way above that number. We're like over 80% of our budget focused on the classroom, or I think it's even higher than that. Yeah, it's about 18% would be like busing, transportation, electricity, things like that. We're over 80% of our budget focused on the classroom, on children.
Which is, break that down, that's personnel salaries?
A lot of it's personnel, yep, and most of it's people. Almost 90% is people.
Okay, all right, very good.
You had asked about the forums.
Right.
Year after year, we try to be very transparent. We do a number of presentations. We'll have staff that will go out to community groups and will provide information so they know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we also have work sessions for board members to get extra information and to have more conversation. And then we have forums, which are times where people can come and we will provide information, and then people can tell us what they want us to know. And keep in mind, I think our board is very responsive. Our personal email addresses and phone numbers are right on the website. And I think that people feel, that it's very easy to get a hold of us. But we do like to have a couple of forums to give people a chance to come in. There's kind of that town hall aspect, and they can just tell us whatever they want. Normally, the town halls, the forums, do not tend to be very well populated. This year, we did get a few more people coming, and I appreciated it very much. And we got a number of opinions. One of the things that we're hearing is that with property tax valuations going up this year, people are feeling that pressure, and I understand that completely. Another message we got loud and clear was that there are a lot of services that Lincoln Public Schools provides that kids and parents depend on, and they want to see those services continue. So I think we've been getting a lot of good feedback that will inform the decisions that we make on this budget as we continue through our process.
So property taxes is the main source of revenue for supporting the schools. Is there state aid, federal aid that's also coming in to support our school system? Mm-hmm. And then a follow-up question on that. I was alarmed a couple of years ago to learn that close to 40, maybe even 50% of our school children are relying on free breakfast lunch programs. So kind of first talk about the other revenue sources that are available to the school board, and then talk about the school lunch program and the number of people that rely on it. Like you were saying, there's so many programs that people rely on.
Well, about half of our revenue comes from property taxes, and then another 25 to 30% comes from state aid, and then the rest comes from other sources, some federal and things like that. So 50% property taxes, say 30% state aid. And this is one of the key issues for us in Nebraska, because in most other states, those numbers are the other way around. And what it means is Nebraska is overly reliant on property taxes to fund K-12 education, and in other states they're putting more money towards an adequate funding of education. So this is kind of an ongoing issue for us year after year, and something that we have to deal with. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
The breakfast and lunch programs that so many people are relying on.
So the only we don't have a survey where we can track actual poverty. One of the only indicators that we have is the free and reduced lunch program, and we're well over 40% and closing in on 50% of our kids who are free and reduced for breakfast and lunch. One of the things to note on that, though, is that our estimate is that that is probably a low number, because we know that when kids get to high school, maybe they get embarrassed, or they don't want to fill out that paperwork, and so they stop doing it. And so our feeling is that that number is probably a little bit low in terms of describing poverty in Lincoln. Sometimes it's said that in Lincoln we hide our poverty really well, but we are closing in on 50% of our kids who are on free and reduced lunch.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot,
It really is.
and it's an issue.
Yes. Um, Talk about the value of public education overall, and we've been talking a little bit about budget and the cost to provide it. And then as a follow-up question, I'd like to know what you think about private schools, and do they provide value and have a role in our educational system here in the Lincoln community, or at least Lancaster County?
Sure. Well, in terms of the value of public education, I think that public education is such an American concept. It's based on that idea that all people are created equal. I mean, there was a time when education was only available to people whose families had money. And the idea of public education is that any American should be able to go into a public school and have access to a high quality education. That's something that we take very seriously. And so there's that concept, and there's kind of that that morality of wanting to take care of our children, the needs of our kids. In fact, one of my mentors, when I first decided to run for the school board, one of the ways that he would talk about that is describing the differences between civilized society and barbaric cultures. And what you would talk about is, in a civilized culture, they plan for the future. And what better way to plan for the future than seeing to the needs, the welfare of our children, making sure that they are educated, they grow up having the skills they need to conduct the business of their lives, to be able to contribute to the economy, and that kind of thing. And then also when you talk about social cost and actual dollars, I can tell you education is much less expensive than prisons. And you talk about the best chances for breaking the cycle of poverty. Education is one of those great equalizers that allows that to happen. I think the second part of your question was private schools.
Right. Yeah. Do they provide a value to our local community here? And what role do they play?
Sure, they absolutely do. Some of my in-laws attend private schools, and that's a great choice for them. And I think that's one of the neat things about Lincoln and the country in general, is that people can choose what's best for them. We have this philosophy at Lincoln Public Schools that parents know what's best for their kids, and we agree with them. So people, they have the ability to make the best choice for their kids, and we support that. We think that's great. One of the things, though, that I think it's unfortunate is that many times people try to compare the public schools to the private schools, and it gets into kind of an apples versus lemons sort of thing. It's not a fair comparison. For example, one thing that people will look at is our budgetary difference, how much private schools will spend per student compared to how much we spend per student. And one of the things that they don't realize is that Lincoln Public Schools actually provides all of the special ed services for the private schools in Lincoln. So that's something where that's a service that kids who go to the private schools get, but the Lincoln taxpayers are paying for it, and it shows up on the LPS budget under special education. So there are just things like that. There are differences. A lot of people don't. They just make it's a meaningless comparison. And ultimately, I think what it comes down to is that parents need to make the best choices for their kids they can, and we trust that they do.
But can I assume that private schools have the same standards for taking certain courses and passing them to graduate? How does that all work?
Well, some of the things that kids in the private schools have to do are different from us. I'm not an expert at that. Okay. I do know that there are enough differences to where, again, comparisons, I think, are just kind of meaningless. One of the other things that I would note, though, too, is that private schools represent what is called a self-selecting sample. People choose to go to a private school, and it's usually parents who are upper middle class or very involved in their kids' lives. There's a certain type of people or family that will send their kids to private schools, and in the public schools we take everybody, and we have to by law, but we want to. Everyone who comes to our doors, we will educate every student who comes into our buildings. And that's something that is necessary, that's important, and it's good duty, and we want to do it. But again, it makes the comparisons essentially meaningless. I think that the kids in the private schools who do very well would also do very well in the public schools.
Right. And does that also carry over then to homeschooled children?
Yes. I think it's a popular misconception that people who are homeschooling their kids are upset with the public schools. Maybe there are some of those, I don't know. But by and large, we have a very good relationship as a school district with our homeschooling community. And we do actually end up providing a lot of supports and services. And it is very common for parents to homeschool their kids for a few years and then have them transfer into the system, into their neighborhood public schools. So we have a great relationship with our homeschooling folks. I remember there was a time with my children, I considered it myself. I thought, nobody knows my kids better than me. Nobody's going to care for them more than me. I will give them the best education ever. And then I realized, boy, I could not compete with the offerings at Lincoln Public Schools. And when you think about just in a science class, with all of the equipment that you need, and all of the people, especially in the upper grades, these math experts and these business experts and all this background and education that I don't have. And I realized that the best thing for my kids was to have exposure to this high quality education in Lincoln Public Schools. Now my kids have all graduated now, but maintaining that high quality of educational opportunities is something that is still very important to me, kind of defines my service.
And I also think that the social aspects of attending a public school is very important to the development of a human being, where you've got the football games and you've got all the extracurricular kinds of things that they can participate in. To me, that is also important, to have that kind of exposure.
I think that is important to a lot of
public
kids.
Citizen.
Yep. No, and I think that's good for a lot of kids. Something we need to remember though is that there are some kids that's not good for. They're not into that, and that's one of the things I think that is so wonderful about the choice that we offer in Lincoln Public Schools, where we have with our focus programs or the Career Academy. We've got these different environments where kids can go. If their traditional high school isn't their thing, we've got other places they can go where they can try to find success. Find ways to be successful. I think that we have a lot of rich offerings and choices in Lincoln that many other districts don't have.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Wonderful. I mentioned that public hearings were held on the LPS budget. Can you tell us again how the school board engages parents and property owners and the other stakeholders in the program, and any other issues surrounding public education? What is it your role as a board member to do community outreach, to get them engaged, keep them engaged, or is that the public schools administration job, or is it a combination of both, and then how do you do that?
Well, it's all the above, and our superintendent, I think, is also very accessible to the community, as is our staff. And in fact, every once in a while I get a phone call from somebody with a concern, and sometimes the best thing we can do is direct them to the appropriate staff person. And that is a system I think that by and large tends to work pretty well. But ultimately, as an elected school board member, my job is to be the voice of the community and to try to represent the will of the community. In fact, one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about is we're talking about budget. Some of the important factors for me that I take into account when we're working through the budget process, or really any decision, is I have kind of a three-point process, or three things that I tend to think of. And the first one is, what is the will of the community? What are our priorities? What kind of town do we want to live in? And what are the things like that are being communicated to me? And I hear from a lot of different people on a lot of different issues. And an interesting side note, on a given issue, it could be that about half the community is very against it, half the community is very for it. No matter what way we vote, somebody is going to feel like we weren't listening. I guarantee we are always listening. We take it all very seriously, and then we weigh it and we try to make the best decisions we can. So what's the will of the community is the first part. The second part, try to make sure that our tax dollars are being spent efficiently, that we're getting the most bang for the buck that we can. An interesting story about that, I had occasion recently to connect with a vendor for us, a technical vendor who provides products and services to Lincoln Public Schools. And he was telling me that Lincoln Public Schools purchased a system and we spent about $200,000 on it. And he said another district, larger than ours, that is also a client of his, spent about $900,000 for almost exactly the same system. Some of the main differences, first off, Lincoln Public Schools did a great job of defining what our actual need was. When we went in, we had it all spec'd out, so we knew exactly what we needed. We weren't just saying, well, throw that in, it'll be nice if we need it someday. We don't do that. We're very careful to make sure that our needs are exactly what we need. And then the other thing is that our people negotiate very hard, and we ended up saving taxpayers a lot of dollars. So, and that is something that is cultural, that is built in to where we are working very hard to make sure that the dollars we have are spent very well. And then the last thing that I'm always thinking of is the effect on taxpayers. And I know that it can seem a little counterintuitive sometimes to think that if we are, property taxes here are high, nobody thinks that's cool. And there are times that we have to keep the rate the same, which if you have a valuation increase means your property taxes are going to go up a little bit. And that is something that we are very aware of. We live here, we pay those same taxes, but what we're thinking is this is what we need to do to take care of the education of our children, and we do it as transparently as we can, and then we ask for feedback. And that's where we're at in our process right now on that.
Okay. So before we leave the topic of budget again, how can they get hold of you if they have something that they want to say or if they want to appear? I don't know if you're going to have any more public hearings on the budget. And when exactly is the new budget going into effect?
We're done on the forums. We're going to be voting on the budget in August. And if people
Okay.
want to get a hold of us before then, what they can do is, as I mentioned, on our website, www.lps.org, look for the Board of Education page, and all 7 of us, our email addresses and phone numbers are there, and that's a great way to get a hold of us. We're all very responsive to email.
Great, wonderful. Okay. I understand that there is a meeting on July 25th. This was reported in the newspaper today, and this is on the issue of school rankings. Can you explain what that is all about, and what are the reasons for keeping or eliminating the ranking process?
Sure. So what the rankings are is that as kids are going through the classes and they get their GPA, their grade point average, and we rank everybody. So the person at the end of the year who has the highest GPA, they are number 1 in their class. Now, that's a pretty simple explanation. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it because you can have advanced placement classes that are weighted. So whereas a normal class, an A might be a 4.0, in some of these classes, an A might be a 4.25 or a 4.5 or something like that. Or even a 5.0, I think is what it is. It's everything is bumped up 1. So what that does is it encourages kids to take the more difficult classes without fear of it wrecking their GPA. Anyhow, at the end of the year, we get to the point where we have everybody ranked according to their GPA, so you know if you graduated 3rd in your class or 9th in your class, or if you were the valedictorian. That's something that you put on your college applications. So to some families, this ranking is very important. And what we have been seeing, what our staff has been seeing, is that countrywide there is a trend to where a lot of colleges just aren't looking at it anymore. Scholarship people aren't looking at it anymore, and it ends up just creating a lot of stress for our kids and for families that is completely unnecessary. So we're considering just getting rid of it. We'll still have GPAs, but whether you finished 3rd or 4th in your class, we're thinking it really doesn't matter.
Right.
So this is something that we're considering.
Okay. And if the public wants to weigh in on that, they
Same
can
thing.
Contact you or
Yep.
go to that meeting. Is that an open?
It is an open meeting, but
And
it's
where are those held? And what
those are
time?
held at the Lincoln Public Schools District Office, and they
Okay.
are on O Street, and they are every other Tuesday on average, and they start at 6 o'clock p.m.
Okay.
But people are, if they feel strongly about it, they're going to want to contact us before the meeting.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So you're thinking that it doesn't provide value for students who are going on for a post secondary education, then that it's maybe outlived its usefulness in terms of getting into a particular school, an Ivy League school or something like that, or that valedictorian doesn't always have to have the highest GPA, that they could be somebody else that has contributed well as a student. Is
Well,
that kind of
the eye on the prize is that everything we should be doing, that we do, should be providing some kind of value. There should be a reason for everything you do. And again, that idea of whether you were 3rd or 4th, for what we were finding is that it really just doesn't matter. It doesn't. That doesn't translate into extra scholarship dollars. There's nothing like that. Now, what we'd be replacing it with is this idea of bands of achievement. So, for example, if you got from a 3.5 to 4.5 or wherever that tops out that year, depending on the weighting, then you would be in this top band or ring of achievement. And that is something that we'd still consider, and that's something that people could still use that if they thought that it was something that was important. So people will still have a way to have their GPA to say that I had this kind of distinction, this kind of achievement, and that's something that they would still be able to use without all of the gaming and the stress of trying to get a couple of extra points so that they can move up one in the ranking.
Okay, very good. We just have a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers that is of current concern to you or to the citizens?
Sure. One of the things that I thought was interesting, going back to the budget for a minute, is that there's been this concept, property taxes are going up this year due to valuations. And what that means is you know, the way that property taxes work is you've got how much your house is worth, and then you've got the rate at which taxes are applied. And those are two things that can change. Your house can go up or down in value, and then we can, as a taxing body, increase or lower our rate. And so if the value goes up and we keep our rate the same, your property taxes will go up. And this is one thing that people have been saying, hey, with this huge increase in valuations this year, that's kind of a windfall for you guys, and you guys shouldn't be using that money. And this is something I think that we end up explaining every few years. In Lancaster County, a full valuation is only done every few years. So instead of like in other counties where the valuations are going up kind of steadily every year, ours are fairly flat, and then we have a big jump. It's not a windfall.
Right.
It's something that we plan for. It's something that we take into account. And again, we're always thinking the effect of our decisions on the taxpayers, but this is money that we were planning to use. So it's unfortunate, I think, that people are referring to it as a windfall.
So
it's
instead
not.
of incremental increases each year, we're really paying in arrears with one big jump every
That's
few
a
years.
very good way to look at it.
Right.
We have a 3-year projection system, so we're not looking just at this year. We're looking also at sustainability, and so that's something that we take into account when we're doing our budgeting process.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, the time has flown by. You know, this has been a very informative, educational interview, and I'm sure our viewers have gained a lot from listening to you. Would you like to add anything else or repeat your website before we close out for the day?
Sure. Our website is www.lps.org. Again, look for the Board of Education page. All of our board members are listed there. Sometimes people tend to look for the board member that represents their area. That's not required. You can call any one of us that you like. Call me if you like. I love hearing from people. I would tell you that my service on the school board is very rewarding. I can't think of a better way to try to give something back to the community than this for me. I love my service.
Well, I'm very pleased that you are doing that, and thank you for the service to our community.
Thank you.
We appreciate it very much. I would like to also thank our viewers for watching another edition of The Watchful Citizen. Our show airs on Tuesdays at 10:30 p.m., Wednesdays at 6 p.m., and Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. on the Spectrum cable channel. You'll have to look up that number because I don't know what it is since they've changed over their channel lineup. If you would like to have more information about our program, The Watchful Citizen, or if you'd like to be a guest, contact the Lancaster County Democratic Party. Our information will appear on the screen at the close of the program. Thank you, Don Mayhew, Lincoln Board member, school board member, and thank you for watching another edition of The Watchful Citizen. We'll see you until next time.